Let's start this third and final session today. And let's have a look at what we'll be covering in this session. We'll begin with another Vipassana practice, nature of mind practice, based on those instructions we saw earlier in the text, the oral instructions to introduce nature of mind. Following that, we'll do a short review of some of the earlier points. And then we will move into this presentation of emptiness, the second part of this Vipassana part of the text. And then we'll specifically looking at the selflessness of person. And within that, what's called identifying the target, or technical term, identifying the object of negation. And then we'll look at the self-grasping mind that we're to overcome. And then we'll begin by looking at how to investigate the person, the me that's here. How do I really exist? And then we'll do a meditation looking for me who's meditating here. And then we'll finish that with a question answer. But let's start with a meditation from some of the points from the earlier part of the text. And I've pulled out a couple of the instructions from some of those traditions there that we'll use as the basis for this meditation. And they are: investigate whether one's own mind is something that arises, abides, and ceases. Another instruction was, without dwelling in the past or anticipating the future, rest serenely in a state of present awareness, fresh and uncontrived. So let's use those instructions as the base of a Vipassana practice to see if we can come to an insight into the nature of our mind. Finding a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Releasing all activities of the mind. And simply allowing it to come to rest. To come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. Relaxed, still, and clear. resting your gaze in the space in front of you, and releasing all appearances, and turning awareness in upon itself, simply knowing that you're aware. Resting in your own mind. Is the mind that you're resting in, is it something which arises? Is it coming from somewhere? Don't try to intellectually answer this. Just look closely. And who or what is this mind that is arising? Again, look closely. Who's the agent, this mind that is arising? Can you find it? Look. And is the mind that you're resting in, is that something which abides? In other words, does it exist somewhere? Look closely. And who or what is abiding? Who is the agent that is abiding? Can you find this agent, the mind that is abiding? Look closely. And is the mind that you're resting in, is that something which ceases? Meaning, is it going somewhere? And who or what is ceasing? Who is the agent, this mind that is ceasing? Look closely. And then release all investigation and just rest. That is, without dwelling in the past, without anticipating the future. Rest serenely in a state of present awareness, fresh and uncontrived. Resting serenely in a state of present awareness, fresh and uncontrived. And we can bring the meditation to a close. We've just started the Vipassana section within Sutra Mahamudra, where Panchen Lama is saying, I shall now introduce the ultimate nature of the mind based on the oral instructions of my root guru, Sangye Yeshe. And here, ultimate nature of the mind within Sutra Mahamudra is emptiness, as directly indicated in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings. And within these outline, within this section of the text, there are two outlines. There's the general presentation of different ways to introduce ultimate nature of the mind. So some different traditions within the Kagyu Mahamudra of how to introduce the nature of the mind, ultimate nature of the mind, and then the presentation having extracted the essence of those instructions. The essence of those instructions is they're all leading the meditator towards realizing emptiness of the mind. So the presentation of emptiness is following. And there we saw that two of the examples of those traditions, they talked about looking for example, the mind. Is it inside the body? Is it outside the body? Is it something that arises, abides, and ceases? We just did that in this meditation here. And then also, is it something that has a color and a shape and so forth? Is it a physical entity? Is it anywhere in the body? And we saw there that these merely realizing the mind has no shape or color or so forth is not directly a realization of emptiness. But by coming to these insights, that can lead us to the deeper insight into the nature of the mind. And that's something His Holiness emphasized in his book, but also here I have a quote from a modern day Dzogchen master, Sultram Zangpo, in his commentary, an ornament of the enlightened view of Samantabhadra. And he says, a person with sharp faculties can determine that the mind cannot be established as truly existing from its own side, is someone who can determine the absence of true existence simply by having been shown partial reasons for establishing that absence. For such a person, just by force of a revelation as to whether or not the mind has any color or shape, and just by the force of being taught the reasons why the mind is devoid of any true origin, location, or destination, which is what we have done now, these two reasonings in the last two meditations, such a person will proceed to establish the fact that the mind lacks true existence. Thus, by the extraordinary power of relying on such reasoning, people with superior faculties are able to realize the emptiness of all phenomena. But he goes on to say, however, it is very important for people like us to hear and reflect upon the Madhyamika treatises, to comprehend all the reasons that establish the absence of true existence, and to establish the nature of emptiness just as it is taught in the Madhyamika. And that's exactly what the next section of the text does. So even here, a great Dzogchen master is saying that, well, for exceptional people, a little bit of asking color, shape, origin, location, destination might be enough to realize the ultimate nature of the mind. But for the rest of us, we need to really study and comprehend thoroughly the reasonings behind establishing emptiness in the Madhyamika text. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So let's move into that. And so we already saw that the first part of that presentation, the three doors of liberation, coming to realize emptiness from the perspective of the thing itself, which is door of liberation of emptiness. Signlessness is coming to realize nothing is inherently produced, has no inherent existent causes, and wishlessness is nothing produces inherently existent results. And we saw here that due to not knowing profound emptiness, migrators wander in samsara. But also here we saw the use of the word selflessness. And what we saw there was that in the Madhyamika philosophical system, the words selflessness and emptiness are synonymous. They both mean a lack of inherent existence. Whereas in the other philosophical systems, they don't have that meaning. That in the other three, the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, selflessness means no autonomous self. And also in the Chittamatra, which does talk about emptiness, emptiness there doesn't mean the same as it does here. Emptiness means there that the world is empty of being external to the mind. And we saw that all the various other teachings from the other philosophical systems, but also the first 5 perfections, all of these various teachings lead us directly or indirectly to the wisdom of emptiness. And they're all taught for that sake, to lead us to that wisdom of emptiness. And then we continue on in the text. It says, furthermore, with respect to directly realizing selflessness, or in other words, emptiness, it is necessary to meditate having first determined selflessness through hearing and contemplating. Also, meditation by way of merely shamatha alone, like some non-Buddhists, does not have the capacity to abandon the mental afflictions. So let's look at the first sentence first. So to realize emptiness or selflessness, first we need to hear about it, reflect on it, and then we meditate on it, and then we can come to realize it. So we have the 3 wisdoms of hearing, contemplation, and meditation. And so we hear about the instructions, we contemplate, we reflect on that, come to an intellectual understanding of emptiness, but then we need to apply that in meditation. We meditate, and then on the basis of shamatha, we can come to a realization of emptiness. But when we initially come to realization of emptiness, it won't be direct. It'll be a conceptual, inferential realization of emptiness. And then eventually we'll be able to even break through that, come to a direct realization, non-conceptual realization. And that process we'll be looking at in more detail. I think that comes on Sunday, right at the end of the text. We'll look at how we move through those stages. That's mentioned right at the end of the text. But also then, like the 3 wisdoms, we can talk similarly like the 3 stages that we go through in this practice. And here I like the Tibetan words, they're very short, go, nyam, tok. So go in Tibetan means intellectual. So again, we hear about emptiness, we reflect and contemplate on it, we get an intellectual understanding of it. But then we need to apply that in meditation to come to a taste or experience of emptiness. That is nyam. And depending on how focused our mind is, that taste or experience of emptiness may have quite a profound, strong effect on our mind. So much so that after the meditation, that experience of emptiness may be still affecting our mind for a few moments, few minutes, few hours, maybe a bit longer. And during that time, what we'll notice, our mind is more calm, less mental afflictions, we feel a bit closer to others. But then eventually that will wear off and back to normal. So what we want to do is deepen that. But to do that, we need to have shamatha, to go from experience to realization. On the basis of a calm, clear, focused mind of shamatha, we can fully penetrate to come to a full, direct realization of emptiness. That's a stable experience, long-lasting effect. And so we saw there in the shamatha chart, in the first half of this retreat, the comment, the root of samsara is cut by the union of shamatha and vipassana, observing emptiness. So we need to unify those 2. So therefore we see shamatha is the basis of vipassana. Without shamatha, at best, we may have a little taste or experience of emptiness, that'll wear off. So we need to go to the next stage of realization. For that, we need shamatha. Oh, and then just one more comment on the second sentence is that shamatha alone won't eliminate mental afflictions. If we achieve shamatha, that will have some very helpful side effects in daily life. Due to simply having that very calm, clear, focused mind, you will notice that your mental afflictions are not as strong. Your craving, attachment, anger, jealousy, fear, anxiety won't be as strong, and they tend not to last as long as they did before. But we haven't got rid of any mental afflictions. We've just sort of subdued them a little bit due to the force of shamatha. If we want to eliminate them, we have to eliminate the root of them. The root of them is our distorted view of reality. To overcome that, we need to come to realize emptiness. And then we continue on in the text. It says, although for such a selflessness, or again, emptiness, there is no division into coarse or subtle by way of entity, there are 2 types by way of a division into person and phenomena. And here there's a quote from Chandrakirti, great 6th century Indian Buddhist master, from his text, which is used very often in establishing view of emptiness in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And he says, Chandrakirti, in order to thoroughly liberate migrators, this selflessness was taught to be of 2 types by way of a division into person and phenomena. And here, when we talk about selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena, selflessness of person is relating to person, but person in terms of me, the person. Whereas selflessness of phenomena is everything other than me, the person. And that can include other people as well, because it's where we're grasping to me, grasping to self, what's called self-grasping. That's where the whole process starts to go wrong. And if we can come to realize there's no independent me here, then we can easily go on to realize there's no independent person, no independent body, mind, phenomena in general. And so this is the progression we go through in this emptiness practice. And then continuing on, it says, although in the scriptures, along with their commentaries, the selflessness of phenomena is determined first, when meditating, it is necessary to first meditate on the selflessness of person. So again, what we see, particularly in like Chandragirti's emptiness text, when he's establishing the view of emptiness in his text, he uses the physical phenomena because it's easier to intellectually determine it through using a physical phenomena. He uses in his text like a cart or chariot. He says, where is the cart or chariot to be found there? And he pulls off a wheel. He says, is that a chariot? Is that a chariot? And he starts pulling it apart and says, well, where's the chariot? There's no chariot to be found there. Whereas when we start to meditate, we start by looking for me, the person, because this is where we start to go wrong, grasping onto me, then we grasp onto an independent world. And this process of starting with person, going on to other things, we see also in the Heart Sutra. Very early in the Heart Sutra, it says, beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. The five aggregates here means body and mind. So what he's in the Heart Sutra is saying, not only is the body and the mind as well are empty of inherent nature, implied meaning not just the person, but the body and the mind are empty of inherent nature. Because just after that, it says, form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form also not other than emptiness. Here, form aggregate means body. And then the next sentence says, in the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. They are the other four aggregates, which is mind. So the Heart Sutra is saying, person is empty of inherent existence, then body is empty of inherent existence, mind is empty of inherent existence. So this is the sequence, the classical sequence we see in the sutras, in the Mahayana sutras, in terms of meditating on emptiness. And so to back that up, we have a quote from a Mahayana sutra called the King of Concentration Sutra that says, just as you discriminate the self, likewise, that understanding is to be applied to all. So just as we discriminate the self, just as we realize there's no inherently existent self, we apply that same understanding to all other phenomena. The nature of all those phenomena is utterly like space. Utterly like space, meaning space is often used as an analogy for emptiness, because emptiness is a mere absence or a lack of finding the inherently existent me. Whereas space also here is a lack of obstruction. That's how it's defined. So it's also a mere negation. So often emptiness is defined or used in analogies like space. And then he goes on to say the sutra, therefore by one, all are known. Therefore by one, all are seen. So it means therefore by realizing emptiness with respect to person, we can realize easily emptiness with respect to all phenomena. And then the text goes on to say, with respect to meditating on the selflessness of person, remember again, this is the same as saying, with respect to meditating on the emptiness of person, initially it is necessary to identify the object of negation, that which is to be negated. And then to back that up, we have a quote from Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, where Shantideva says, without contacting the thing that was imputed, you will not apprehend that thing's non-existence. And then he comments, he says, if the object of negation is not identified, it is like shooting an arrow without seeing the target or leading an army without identifying the enemy. So if we want to meditate on emptiness of person or selflessness of person, then we need to identify what's called the object of negation, meaning that we need to clearly identify the me that seems to be here, the one that we're grasping onto, this independent me that really seems to be here. And we need to clearly identify that, because that's what we need to look for, the one that we believe in, the one that we're grasping onto. If we don't have a clear picture of that, then, as the Panchen Lama is saying, then it's like shooting an arrow without seeing the target, or leading an army without identifying the enemy. Or like the example I often give is, if we want to, for example, let's say we want to look for a particular person in a crowded room. If we don't have a clear picture of what that person looks like, we can look all day and we'll never come to any conclusion, is that person in the room or not? Similarly here, if we don't clearly identify the me that we're holding on to, this solid independent me that really seems to be here, then when we search for it, then what are we searching for if we don't have a clear picture of the me that really seems to be here? So therefore, this is the first and most important point in doing this meditation on emptiness of person, to get a clear picture of how we're wrongly grasping onto ourselves, because that's what we need to look for, to see whether that me that we're grasping to, does that me really exist or not? And then it goes on, and in the heading here is identifying the target. That's in His Holiness's book, the How to See Yourself as You Really Are. He calls identifying the object of negation, which is the technical term, identifying the target. The target, we need to know, what is the target? What is the me that we're going to look for? The one that we're holding on to now that really seems to be here. Then the text goes on to say, also with respect to identifying the object of negation, if there is an over-pervasion, then you will fall to the extreme of nihilism. And if there is an under-pervasion, since the subtlemost object of negation will not be refuted, you will fall to the extreme of eternalism. So that's a lot of technical words there that probably you go, well, what's all that saying? I don't know. What's all that mean? So let's unpack that and try and make it a little bit more simple. Firstly, what we can talk about, what are called the two extremes. The two extremes are existence and non-existence. Meaning for us now, there seems to be two choices. Either there is a real independent me here and a real independent objective world there, or there's no me and no world. That's the only two choices we can see. We've never seen anything else. So these are the two extremes. The extreme of existence is grasping onto independent me, independent objective world. And that is what's referred to here as eternalism. And this is an extreme of what's called superimposition, meaning we are adding something on top of reality. There is a me in a world, but what we're putting on top of me in the world is that the me is an independent me and the world is an independent world. So that's what we're superimposing on reality, the belief that it's independent. The other extreme is non-existence. So for us, again, either there is an independent me world or there's no me and no world. So the other extreme is non-existence or nihilism. And that's also what's called the extreme of deprecation, where we're taking away what's actually there. We're stripping away reality itself. So what we are wanting to do in this practice is we're wanting to strip away what we've put on top of the world and me, meaning we've put on the idea that there's an independent me, independent world. We want to strip that away without stripping away the me in the world and end up with nothing. That's nihilism. And so the analogy that we often hear here sometimes is that what we're trying to do is to throw out the bathwater without throwing out the baby. So what's talking about here is over-pervasion, means we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're stripping away not only the independent world and me that we're putting on top of reality, but we're stripping away me in the world as well. We're throwing out everything. So that's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So that's over-pervasion. Under-pervasion is when we're not stripping away enough. So then using the analogy, that would be like only throwing out a little bit of the bathwater, not all the bathwater. So we want to get rid of all the bathwater. And so that's when we're not stripping away enough. So therefore, we want to find that middle way between the two extremes. We want to be able to strip away what we're putting on top of the reality without stripping away reality. And so to strip away, we need to know what we're stripping away. Otherwise, we strip either not enough or too much. And so that's identifying the object of negation, to clearly understand and see what exactly are we putting on top of reality so we can strip that away and be left with me and the world without stripping away me and the world altogether. So that's what's being said here. And then the text goes on to say, furthermore, as said in the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 verses. So this is the short, we saw the three mothers earlier in the text, the extensive, brief, middling, and brief Perfection of Wisdom teachings. This is the brief Perfection of Wisdom, the 8,000 verses. And so here it says, due to grasping to I and mine, all sentient beings cycle in samsara. So grasping to I and mine means grasping to an inherently existent me, an independently existent me. And grasping to mind means grasping to the world as inherently existent, as independently existent. So why is this the root cause of why we're stuck in samsara? Let's unpack that process here. So again, grasping to I is self-grasping, grasping to an inherently existent me, a me that exists from its own side, a me that exists independently. Now, when we look out on the world appears to exist completely independent of us. In fact, there seems to be an independent me here and an independent objective world out there. So what's appearing to us is what's called mistaken dualistic appearance. There seems to be a subject-object duality, a me here and a world there. And we have this habit of grasping to independent me and independent world. That's called seed of ignorance. Seed of ignorance here is this grasping to independent me, independent world. Seed of ignorance means habit of that. And we've had that habit since we were born and well before, according to Buddhism. And so when we look out on the world, and there seems to be then an independent objective world out there and an independent subjective me here, and we have the habit of believing those appearances, we never question those appearances because we've never seen the world and me in any other way. It's always appeared in this way. So there's no reason to question appearances. So we never do. We just instinctively grasp, yes, independent world, independent me. That's step 2, self-grasping. Grasping to independent me, independent world. And then whenever we experience something, we always have this mental factor of feeling in every one of our experiences. And here in Buddhism, the word feeling doesn't mean emotion. It simply means experiencing things as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So for example, let's say in fact, I've got an example here. We can fit it into I've got some nice orchids here. When we look at these orchids, this flower, they seem to exist completely independent of us. And let's say, and we don't question that. So we just grasp, yeah, there's some flowers there existing independent. Well, let's say when we're looking at these flowers, I'm having a pleasant experience. Then that pleasant experience, together with the belief that those flowers existing there objectively independent of me, will naturally lead me to assume there must be some attractive quality here that's causing my pleasant feeling. So we'll see these as inherently attractive or attractive from the own side, that the beauty is coming from the flower. And this, according to the view of emptiness, is a misconception. But that's step 3. And similarly, if I look at these flowers and having an unpleasant experience when I see these flowers, together with the belief that those flowers exist there objectively, independent of me, that will naturally lead me to assume there must be some unattractive quality there causing my unpleasant experience. We'll see them as inherently unattractive or unattractive from their own side. The unattractive quality is there in the flower. So this is misconception. Or if I'm having a neutral experience, which means just neither pleasant nor unpleasant, that will simply lead me to reinforce the idea that those flowers exist independent of me. We'll see them as inherently neutral. So once we get to step 3, then step 4 easily follows. Again, let's say when we're looking at these flowers, we're having a pleasant experience. I like pleasant experiences. I want pleasant experiences. These flowers seem to be causing my pleasant experience. I want those flowers, attachment. Or if I'm having an unpleasant experience when I see these flowers, I don't like unpleasant experiences. I don't want unpleasant experiences. These flowers seem to be causing my unpleasant experience. Get them out of here, aversion. Or if having a neutral experience, that will simply reinforce mistaken belief. Those flowers exist independent of me, which is this self-grasping ignorance. But here, often we see the word confusion. Confusion is it doesn't mean we're confused about whether or not they're in flowers. We're confused about how they exist. In fact, we're grasping onto them, existing independently. So here we have the 3 main mental afflictions: attachment, aversion, ignorance, or confusion, which are called the 3 poisons. And then all other mental afflictions come out of one of those or a combination of them. And these mental afflictions are driving our behavior. And the Buddha's assertion is that every action we do based on a mental affliction has a consequence, has a result. And the results of our actions are our various experiences. And our experiences in this world, this existence we have, collectively, the Buddha used the word dukkha to describe that we are stuck in this state of dukkha, often translated as suffering. So therefore, we are stuck in this cycle of existence called samsara due to this self-grasping ignorance, grasping to I and mine. So this is the process of how this self-grasping ignorance is trapping us in this state of dukkha, life after life after life. And that is what is called samsara, cycling in the state of suffering or dukkha, life after life, under the power of this self-grasping, under the power of ignorance. So that's self-grasping. Then if we move on in the text, it says, and we'll come back to that process again later, because there's a few things I want to add to that. So we'll come back to it probably 2 or 3 more times in the coming days. Then the text goes on to say the final root of all faults is innate self-grasping, the innate grasping to I. Innate means sort of inborn. It's not something intellectual. It's instinctive, that we're grasping instinctively to an independent me, independent world. And it says, with respect to an awareness apprehending I in general, there are 3 ways of apprehending I. The 3 ways of apprehending me, I, the person, is an I qualified by being truly existent, an I qualified by lacking true existence or by being a mere name, merely imputed by thought, and 3, an I that is not qualified by either of those 2. So what does that mean? Let's look at the commentary and then we'll unpack that more. So it says the 3rd one is a conventional valid cognition positing the mere I. So now when we have I appears, and then what we do is there's a me here. So there's no Buddhist tradition that says that there's no me and no world. There's a me here. But then as soon as this me appears, we grasp onto it as independently existent. That's another, truly existent is another word. So we have a number of terms that are synonymous: independent existence, true existence, inherent existence, existing from its own side. These all mean the same thing. So here, an I qualified by being truly existent is grasping onto independent me. So that at the end of the commentary says the first one is grasping to self of person. That's when there's me appears and then we go, grasp, and we grasp onto independent me. The second one is an I qualified by lacking true existence or by being mere name, merely imputed by thought. And the commentary says the second one only occurs in the continuum of those who have gained certainty with respect to the Madhyamika view. It does not occur in others. So we don't apprehend ourselves as something being merely labeled, merely imputed by conception and so forth, until we have come to understand the Madhyamika view of emptiness. once we have come to understand emptiness and we've gained certainty with that, that we really, through reasoning and meditation and logic, that we've come to really not just intellectually accept emptiness, that's not enough. If we have really reflected and contemplated on the reasonings and logic and then meditated on it, and then we've really gained certainty through our understanding and experience that really there is no independent me here, then we can see ourselves in that way, by that the me here is something that's merely labeled. It's not independently existent. And then the third one here, and that is not qualified by either of those two. It says it's just a conventional valid cognition positing the mere I. So there's a me that appears, and that is a valid mind that acknowledges there is a me here and a world there. That's a valid cognition called conventional valid cognition. Validly seeing there is a me, there is a world. But soon as we have that valid cognition, yep, there's a me here, then for us, what we do is we grasp onto that and we go, that me that is here is existing independently. And that's the first one, grasping. And to get rid of that grasping, we have to gain certainty with the view of emptiness. So that's what's being said here in this paragraph. And then if we go on to the next part of the text, it says, since self-grasping is the root of samsara, without refuting the conceived object of that, you will not be able to abandon self-grasping. And so here is quoting again from a great Indian master, Dharmakirti. He says, without refuting its object, you will not be able to abandon self-grasping. So again, without having clearly identified this object of negation, i.e. the way in which we are conceiving of ourselves to exist as an independent me, without being able to refute that, overturn that through reasoning and meditation, we're not going to be able to abandon self-grasping, because to be able to abandon self-grasping, we have to come to an insight into emptiness. And so then the text goes on and says, since the conceived object of grasping to the being, the I, the person, is truly existent, is a truly existent being, a truly existent I, a truly existent person, it is necessary to refute that. So how do we refute that truly existent me that seems to be here? It says, refuting that is to view the person as lacking true existence. So by ascertaining that the person lacks true existence, and we do that through reasoning and logic, we come to look at, through reasoning and logic, we come to see, there is no independent me here. And then through doing that in meditation and then coming to that experience, there's no independent me here. And then familiarizing yourself with that, that is familiarizing yourself with that experience of emptiness, which is an insight or realization, there's no independent me here. By familiarizing ourselves with that, deepening that, coming to a direct realization, then the grasping to person as truly existence will be reversed. So merely a correct intellectual acceptance of emptiness is not going to do it. Even coming to a correct intellectual understanding is not enough. We need to familiarize, internalize, and meditate to come to an experience of emptiness. And it's through that experience of emptiness and meditation that we'll be able to reverse this self-grasping mind. And so he says, for that reason, I will first explain with oral instructions the way in which the object of negation appears and the way in which it is apprehended. And so if we go on to the next slide, and now we are coming to the actual meditation practice. So this is now how we're going to meditate to come to realize emptiness of person. And so here the text says, without wavering in the slightest from the earlier state of meditative equipoise, i.e. single-pointedly equipoised in the concentration of shamatha, meaning that if we really want to be able to do this investigation in Vipassana, then we need a very calm, clear, focused mind of shamatha. Because if we don't have this calm, clear, focused mind, and and we try to investigate, then it's not going to work very well. It's a little bit like that example I gave earlier. If we want to look for a particular person in a room, but we've got poor eyesight and it's a dark room, then even if we know what the person looks like, so remember identifying object of negation, but even if we have that clear, but then we try to do the search and we can't clearly search, then it'll be inconclusive. So it'd be like, without shamatha, it'd be like looking for a person in a dark room and we've got poor eyesight. I mean, we can look all day, even if we know clearly what the person looks like, still we won't be able to find out if that person is in the room because we can't see clearly. So similarly, even if we do have a correct identifying the object of negation, what we need to eliminate, if we can't search clearly, then we're not going to come to any solution, any result. So that's why it says here, without wavering from that. So on the basis of a calm, clear, focused mind, then it says, just as, for example, a small fish darts through a lake filled with clear water without disturbing the water, likewise use a subtle awareness to intelligently investigate the nature of the person, the I, who is the meditator. Meaning that with a calm, clear, focused mind, use a subtle awareness to investigate, not to use a coarse awareness, an agitated mind. Like if the fish is disturbing the water, then it'll pull up the sediment, won't be able to see clearly. So similarly, with a calm, clear, focused mind, use a subtle awareness to investigate. Investigate the nature of me, the person, the I, the me who's here meditating. And so the text goes on to say, well, that is, investigate the way in which the person appears to the mind, the way in which the person is apprehended by the mind, and then the way in which the person actually exists. And so when we investigate and we look, we see me, the person, how's it appearing? The me that seems to be here. This me that seems to be here really is appearing as if it exists completely independent of everything else, objectively, existing from its own side. That's how it appears. And then how do we apprehend the person? Do we question that appearance, or do we just automatically accept it? Do we apprehend, yeah, there's an independent me here? And I think that's what we do. But then how does the person actually exist? Is there this independent me that seems to be here that we're grasping onto? Because if that independent me is here and it exists objectively, then we must be able to find it. We must be able to find it here somewhere. So then we can search for that independent me that really seems to be here to come to see the way in which the person actually exists. Is there in fact an independent me here or not? That's what we're going to do in the meditation now. And this process of investigating tomorrow gets unpacked in a lot more detail in a step-by-step way. But let's do that practice now based on the instructions we've got so far. And then we'll get a little bit of a taste for this practice. And then tomorrow we'll, through the text, unpack it more in terms of the step-by-step process that we go through to do this practice. But let's do that meditation now. Finding a nice, comfortable posture, let's begin. As always, we begin by preparing the body, setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. All the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And preparing the mind, setting it into a state of ease and relaxation. Releasing all activities of the mind and simply allowing it to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. Allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. And then without wavering from this state of a calm, clear, focused mind, use a subtle awareness to intelligently investigate the nature of the person who's meditating here, this me that seems to be meditating here. How does the me who is meditating here appear to exist? Does it seem to exist from its own side? To exist objectively? And do you simply accept this appearance without questioning it? Grasping on to the me who's meditating here as existing from its own side, existing objectively? But does the me who's meditating here really exist in this way? Existing objectively, existing from its own side? If it does, it must be findable. We must be able to find the me who's meditating somewhere here. Can the me who's meditating be found anywhere within the body? So search thoroughly every part of the body and look for the me who's meditating. Is the whole body itself? Is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the whole body itself simply something which me, the meditator, is trying to relax? Can the me who's meditating here be found anywhere within the mind? Again, search thoroughly every part of the mind and look for the me who's meditating here. Is the whole mind itself? Is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the whole mind itself simply something which me, the meditator, is using to focus on the object? Is the collection of the body and the mind, is that the me who's meditating here? Or is the collection of the body and the mind simply a collection of two things which me, the meditator, is trying to train? Two things which me, the meditator, possesses. Yet, apart from the body and the mind, what else is there here? if there's nothing more than the body and the mind here, then where is the me that possesses this body and mind, is training this body and mind? Where is the me who's meditating? If you can't find the me who's meditating here, then simply rest in the experience of not finding, knowing that the meditator is nowhere to be found. And even if you didn't find the meditator, isn't there someone who's experiencing all of this? So there is a me here meditating. But how can this me exist if we don't seem to be able to find it? Me, the meditator, is empty like an illusion, a mere appearance, a mere name, merely imputed by conception, merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. Nothing more than this. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Got plenty of time for question and answer, so if there's any questions, put them in the chat, and then Tamara will read them out. Do we have any questions, or maybe even any questions left over from the last session?
We just got a question.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question from Irit, and she asks, you mentioned that Chitta Matra is based on the third turning of the wheel. Could you please elaborate on that?
Okay, this is a huge topic. I'll try to be brief because you could spend all day talking about this. We can talk about what's called the 3 turnings of the wheel of the teachings of the Buddha. The first turning of the wheel were the 4 Noble Truths teachings, the foundation teachings. And in those teachings, the goal is nirvana, personal liberation. How we get there is realizing there's no autonomous self. And that formed the basis, those teachings forms the basis of the Vaibhashika Sautrantika philosophical systems. The second turning of the wheel is what this is based on, and that is the perfection of wisdom teachings, teaching this idea of emptiness, that nothing exists inherently. And so that forms the basis of the Madhyamika philosophical system. And then there's a third turning of the wheel, and there's a couple of parts to that, but to keep it simple, the third turning of the wheel is teachings that there is no independent, objective, external world out there. And that's not so difficult to refute. But the conclusion that was come to in those teachings is, that's because the world is internal to the mind. And hence the word chittamatra, mind only, that there seems to be an independent physical external world out there. But actually, if we investigate closely, we'll come to realize this is like an illusion. That's emptiness for them, that there is no independent external world. And one of the things they draw on for this assertion is they say, well, it's just like a dream, that in a dream, if you're in a dream, there appears to be an independent material dream world there, made up of atoms and molecules and so forth. And we bump into things in the dream. But then if we wake up in the dream, we become lucid, we'll realize this is an illusion, that even though there appears to be a physical world in the dream, there's no physical world at all, because that world in the dream is internal to the mind. And so their assertion is here, if we investigate closely and we become lucid in the waking world by realizing emptiness, this non-duality, we'll come to realize that this world, which appears to be an external material world, is internal to the mind only. The Madhyamikas, which this emptiness is part of, I mean, both Chittamatra and Madhyamika refute the first 2 schools. The first 2 schools, the Sautrantika Vaibhashika, say, yep, there's an independent, external, objective world made up of atoms. It's there. It exists objectively, independently. The problem is not how we see the world. The problem is how we see ourselves as a person. We're grasping to autonomous self. That's the problem. Let's get rid of that. We can achieve nirvana. But then both Chittamatra and Madhyamika say, no. You investigate that world that seems to be existing there independently, externally. You'll come to see there's no such thing as an independent external world. But they both come to a different conclusion. The Chittamatrans say there's no independent external world there, because actually there's an independent internal world. It's internal to the mind. It's mind only. Whereas Madhyamikas will say, no, you Chittamatrans, you came to the wrong conclusion. There's no external independent world because there's an external dependent world. That's the Madhyamikas. So they both refute the 2 schools lower, but they come to different conclusions. And so there's a lot more to be said, but that's sort of the brief answer. So maybe we can leave it at that. Otherwise, it starts to get very philosophical and complicated after that. So that's the short answer. If you want to know more about it, then you can study tenets, the tenets texts in all the schools. They go through these 4 schools, unpacking them a lot of detail. So if you're really interested in understanding those 4 schools in depth, I suggest you get one of those teachings from one of the schools in Tibetan Buddhism.
Thanks. Next question from Dana. What do you mean by a clear picture of the me, referring to identifying the target?
Yeah. Again, we have to, when we look out on the world, not only do things appear to us like cups and flowers and so forth, but also there's a me that is appearing to our mind. There's a me that's experiencing all of this. And just as we then grasp onto the cup and the flower as existing there objectively, they seem to be like that. And then we accept those appearances. We just grasp. Yes, there's an objective independent cup there, independent flower. And just like that, the me that is experiencing all of that, which seems to be independently here, we just grasp onto that. There is an independent me here. It's not something intellectual, it's instinctive. But the question is, do we really exist like that? And so to be able to search for that independent me that seems to be here, then we need to have a clear picture of what we're searching for. Like the analogy, like I said, if we're looking for a particular person in a crowded room, then if we don't have a clear picture of what that person looks like, then we can look all day and we'll never come to a conclusion. Similarly here, if we don't have a clear picture of how we grasp onto ourselves as existing independently, then when we look, then it'll be inconclusive. And so that's what's all about, this identifying object of negation. And we'll come back to that tomorrow in a little bit more detail, is that that's the most important point. Because if we get that wrong, if we don't have a clear picture of how we see ourselves existing, then when we do the search, it'll be completely inconclusive. Just like if we're going to search for a particular person in a room, but we don't have a clear picture of what that person looks like, then we can search all day and we'll never come to a conclusion whether or not that person is in the room. So similarly here. Now, just to add a little bit to that maybe, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, is when we sit down to meditate, when we're going to do this meditation, we relax the body, we relax the mind, and then actually, with a very relaxed body and mind, we don't tend to have a very strong sense of me. There's a me, but it's sort of a bit vague because we don't have that strong grasping anymore. And so they often recommend in this Vipassana practice of looking for the person, as a starting point, is when you sit down to meditate, think of a situation such as someone is criticizing you for something you didn't do, or someone's praising you for something wonderful you did. In both of those situations, you have a very strong sense of me. Me, how dare you criticize me? Oh, the me, I'm wonderful, I'm being praised. Then we really have a clear sense of this me. It looms large in our mind. Me, that really seems to be here. That's what we need to become familiar with, because that's what we're going to search for. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But that's the sort of the most important point in the process. But more will come tomorrow. That's sort of the short answer.
Thanks. Next question is from Tom. And it reads, in the previous session, when we meditated on the nature of the mind, how do we establish a good notion of awareness or mind in order to investigate it? So I think he's referring to identifying the target.
So here, this is why what we see is that those approaches we saw earlier, the ones that coming from the oral Mahamudra tradition, we're looking for where is the mind located, its color, shape, and so forth. They are a very different approach than what we're starting to look here in terms of person. So what we're doing now and more tomorrow is really the classic approach that we find coming from like great masters like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and so forth, that this sort of identifying the object of negation, where's the me that seems to be here, and then searching for it. And we'll unpack that process more tomorrow. That's a very classic approach, sort of using a lot of reasoning and logic to go through that investigation. Whereas in the nature of mind, it's a very direct approach. So I think actually in those Mahamudra and Dzogchen practice systems, I don't think you'll ever find this term object of negation, because that's not the approach they're using. They're using just a very direct approach in terms of the method used to come to realize the emptiness of the mind. We could do the approach here with the mind as well, get a clear picture of the mind, and then using the similar approach to search for the mind, but that's not the approach that was being used earlier. So it's a very different system, a different approach. So we don't need to do that identifying object of negation in that way of approaching emptiness.
Thanks. So next question is from Dalit, and the question is, how do I avoid words and thoughts and concepts when I try to observe awareness or rest in awareness?
I assume that this question is now talking the shamatha practice of resting in awareness. And so I'll answer on that basis, is that all sorts of appearances will arise. That's our habit. Now our mind tends to be very active. And so when we rest in awareness, that will happen. We'll have all sorts of things coming up. Again, in this practice, we're not trying to avoid them or block them or make them go away, because then we're just going to get agitated and frustrated, and we're actually then focusing on them because we want them to go away. So rather, let them be there. Let them be there. Not following them, not engaging in them, but let them be there. They can be there. That's okay. It doesn't matter. So that's fine. We're just not interested in them. And initially, of course, they'll have some pull, because our habit is, as soon as they come up, we get caught up and get swept away. So not to have unrealistic expectations when we begin this resting in awareness that, oh, I'll be able to completely ignore all my thoughts and emotions now, and I'll just be able to rest in awareness. That won't happen, because that's not, we don't have any habit to do that. So what's going to happen for sure is some thoughts and emotions will come up, we'll grab hold of them, and off we go. And then we just let them go, and we come back to awareness. Just keep coming back to awareness, come back. And so it's just developing the habit of just resting in awareness and not getting caught up in our thoughts and emotions. But again, equally important, not to fight with them, not to go, oh, not there again, go away. I wish they'd go away, because that's like throwing petrol on a fire. They'll just get worse. So if they're there, okay, doesn't matter. And as best you can, don't allow yourself to get caught up in them. And if you do get caught up, just come back and go back into awareness, and to keep doing that. And then slowly you'll develop the habit of being able to rest in awareness, regardless of what's going on around there in the mind. And then the more you do that, then eventually all that activity will slowly calm down over time. And eventually the mind will go still anyway. So that's how to approach it in a sort of step-by-step way, without the unrealistic expectations, and do the best we can. That's all.
Thanks. Next question is from Dror, and it reads, when explaining about no independent me and no independent world, you use the example with the flowers. I can understand why the properties of the flowers, nice, not nice, smell, small, smell good, is created by the viewer. But saying that there is no flower or no sun actually mean that the atoms are not there, which seems to be nihilism. So is seeing the flowers, dependent mean looking at them without giving properties?
Yeah. So we'll bring the flowers back into the picture here. This is something we're going to go into in a lot of detail tomorrow. So I'll give a short answer now. Is the characteristics of something like beauty and so forth, that's a little bit easier to realize that we are putting that on there, because it's easy to understand that we say, oh, that's attractive, but someone else says, oh, that's ugly. And we realize that we are putting that on there. But surely there's a thing that we're putting it on, no? But then if we look, flower here, isn't it a collection of many things? There's a sort of like purpley thing here and a white thing. And isn't it just a collection of many things that we are creating one object called a flower? And then we can go down at each level. We can say, oh, here is a petal, but isn't a petal a name we're giving to a collection of a lot of data in this area here? Aren't we creating a meaningful thing called a petal to help us to understand all of this? And then if we keep going down, 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 we can go right down to atoms. But isn't an atom something that a concept that we've created to explain a grouping of subatomic particles? And isn't a subatomic particle a concept that we've created to explain further down, down, down? So basically, there's no bottom. But the trick is, and this is what we've touched on briefly already, and we'll go to tomorrow again, is for us, there seems to be just two choices. Either there is an objective, real, functioning world, or there's no world. We don't see any other possibility. And so this view of emptiness that we're just starting to get into now is negating that, is negating an independent me and an independent world. But then it seems like emptiness is negating me and the world. There's no me and no world. But that's where we talked about finding the middle way, that we need to strip away what we're putting on top of me in the world. That is, that there's an independent me and an independent world. We strip away that independent existence that we're putting onto things, and then we're left with me in the world. We're left with a functioning world. And that is an interdependent me and an interdependent world. But more will come tomorrow. So that is sort of the short answer. And again, the challenge here is that we're stuck in the two extremes. We only really see there's two choices, two possibilities, either real independent me, independent objective world, or no me and no world. And what this view of emptiness is saying is there's a third possibility, the middle way between those two extremes. There is a me, there is a world, I function, the world functions, but everything is interdependent. And that's coming tomorrow, that explanation. So that's still yet to come. Maybe if we have one more question, but then we need to, I think, stop.
Okay, yes, we have actually a continuation from Dana. She asked about how to identify the me. And this new question, she asks, so if I understand correctly, we are searching for a feeling instead of a visual picture of me, or is it both?
I mean, it's not a feeling. It's not a feeling. It's the me that we are relating to. Like if we're going to look for the cup, then we need to have a clear picture of the independent cup that seems to be here. It's not a feeling. It's just how we see the cup. So the me is just how we see ourselves existing. And we see ourselves existing as completely independent from our own side objectively. That's the me that we're relating to. That's the me that we need to look for. And if that me exists, it must be findable. So it's not like a feeling. It's just how we apprehend ourselves, how we experience ourselves. Just like when we look here, there seems to be a single thing there, a cup existing objectively. And so if we're going to do the search, that's the cup that we need to look for, because that's the one we're experiencing, the one we're apprehending, the single thing there that seems to exist objectively. But is there an objective single cup there to be found in that area? So similarly with the person, but more will come tomorrow. Let's leave it there because we've run out of time. If there's any more questions, we'll answer those tomorrow, because maybe some of the answers to the questions will come in tomorrow's sessions anyway. It seems like the questions are leading into the material for tomorrow anyway. So let's leave it there, and let's finish by dedicating all of our efforts today, and we'll use this Shantideva dedication prayer. So as I read out the dedication prayer, you might like to reflect on the words. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are warm with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you. And so tomorrow we'll start same time, 8:30, and we'll continue on in the text and we'll really look at establishing this view of emptiness. A lot more coming in the text now, so I think you'll find it very interesting tomorrow's session. So that's it for now. So enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you all again same time tomorrow. So bye now.
Thanks, Glenn. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. See you again tomorrow. Bye, Pada.
תודה רבה, להתראות.
תודה לכם, ביי ביי.
ביי, תודה רבה.